I'm here at Vancouver Career College, invited by Alana Dillon, instructor of the Social Service Worker Program in Quitlam, BC. I'll be speaking on palliative care, hospice care, anticipatory grief, and my own experience with loss and the book that I've written to Alana's class. And I hope that my talk on this subject and my own experience will expand your awareness, as some of you may be working in areas such as hospice, palliative care, and clients experiencing grief. So, I introduce myself by telling people that I'm an author and that I've been asking men and women, young and old, the same question. If you're in the dating market and you met someone and you're intensely attracted to them, and not so much on a physical basis, but really on an emotional basis, and then they told you they're probably going to die from an illness within a year, would you still get involved romantically? It's a question that provokes a lot of thought. And my story is, I did get involved romantically. So here's some background. I've been married and divorced twice, my choice. For the past 14 years, I was a single parent, and during that time, my focus was on raising my sons, and work, and friends, and family. Since a cancer scare in 2002, a subsequent surgery, and start of an exercise and diet regime, I shed 94 pounds and finally got into top physical shape. It was now 2007, and I decided it was time to venture into the dating market again. I went on the Plenty of Fish dating website, and it was there that I met Michael, the father of an adult son and daughter, and he had been divorced for a number of years. He was also terminally ill with stage 4 terminal cancer. Our first contact was a telephone conversation which lasted over 2 hours. He was upfront and told me about his cancer diagnosis right away. Never in my life had I met a man that intrigued and interested me more. He was incredibly brave, and I wanted to meet him, whether it became romantic or not. We had our first date on January 20th, and we went on our first big trip on March 26th, which was Michael's 53rd birthday. When the plane landed on the runway, Michael started to cry. He said he never expected to see this birthday, and he was so grateful that he was still here, and that we were in Cuba. Our relationship was, of course, not the norm, and we had our challenges. How do you make plans when you're always aware of the fact that his death was impending? How do you manage to be happy? We did much of the time. We did normal things, grocery shopping, laundry, the bathroom still had to be cleaned, and the garbage still had to be taken out. We made the best use of our time. We worked on never going to bed angry. Of course we fought, and we had some heated arguments, but we resolved them fairly quickly. After all, we didn't have a lot of time. We'd only been dating for about 3 weeks when we found out that the cancer had become aggressive and that chemo treatments would need to start again. As time went on, there were more medical appointments, chemo, and radiation treatments. I also knew it would only get worse. After a few months of dating, I realized that if I could not see the relationship to the end, that I had to leave now. I was scared, but I was more scared of not having a life with him, and so I stayed. Here's an excerpt from the book. Life that is a constantly changing process. Some days I wake up feeling pretty good, and others the thought hits me as soon as I wake up. My Michael's gone. He's dead, and there's nothing I can do to change the situation. I can't bring him back. There's no rewind on life. I feel the overwhelming urge to throw up, give up, and just lie there in a heap of tears. I know I can't, as they say life does go on, and mine has continued to do so in this past year. I've had to make myself go on. Losing. What a silly expression, as I didn't misplace him, but he's no longer physically here on this earth with me. Him has been the hardest thing I've ever dealt with in my life, yet it has also been the most life-changing experience ever. To this day, I would never trade my time with Michael for a safe, comfortable life. At times he told me how I saved his life, but in reality he saved mine. Something was always missing before I met him, and he filled that void. The intensity of the pain of living without him continues to lessen over time, and the joy of being so very loved replaces that space more and more as time goes on. You won't get flowery prose from me. Life is tough, and this whole experience has rocked my world, good and bad. Some days it's hell, but other days I laugh a little harder, smile a little brighter, and I know that I'm going to be okay. They say that grieving has its peaks and valleys. Special dates and holidays trigger memories, as do rituals, songs, places, and anything in life that you shared together. I'm the crazy Asian lady walking around the grocery store, T&T actually, trying not to burst into tears as I pick up a green onion, because I remember how Michael wouldn't buy green onions unless you could get the same discount for buying one that you would only get when you bought two. After finding, loving, and being loved by Michael, I really do now believe my life was planned out from the very beginning. Please let me share with you the story of the love of my life, Michael. Palliative care. Before I met Michael, I understood that when someone went to live in a hospice, they would die there. And I just assumed that palliative care was another form of hospice care. I did not realize that palliative care was not end-of-life care, but comfort care, supportive care, and symptom management. That the purpose was to relieve symptoms, regardless of whether there was a cure. Just a few months into our relationship, Michael's mom told me that it was too difficult to care for Michael, that he could go into palliative care. I was determined that this would not happen, and that he would live at home for as long as possible. With the help and support of family and friends, I wanted him at home until we could no longer cope. I believed that once he went into care, he would lose the will to live. In late 2008, when the oncologist told Michael and I that there would no longer be any further treatment, his health deteriorated further. I never returned to work. I took a few days vacation, and then I went on compassionate care leave, which is an EI program that Michael's palliative care doctor signed off on. At that time, it was only 6 weeks. It has since been changed, fortunately, to 26 weeks, 6.5 months, which is a significant change from what I had in 2008. On January 1st, 2008, Michael woke up extremely disoriented. He could not hold himself up, and he kept sliding off the bed when I sat him upright. I phoned his family, and then his palliative care doctor, and we called an ambulance, which took him to Richmond General Hospital. He was admitted into the palliative care ward. I moved in with him as well. I do have to say it was brutal staying in the palliative care ward. There was one cancer patient who was in such pain you often heard her moaning. The cancer had spread to her soft organs, and no amount of pain medication was enough to bring her any relief. The anguish on her loved ones' faces as they left her room was heartbreaking. Later, she came to live in the hospice while Michael was there. Michael was in palliative care for about a week, and during that time, the doctors and nurses were able to stabilize him. His oxygen levels and medications were adjusted. The change in his health from July 1st was startling. He was eating again, he was hungry, and I couldn't be happier to get up in the middle of the night to go warm up something for him. He was doing better than he'd been in the last 6 to 8 weeks. His appetite was back to normal, and he was breathing well. He had some anxiety, but I believed it would ease up as he settled back home. I never thought leaving palliative care to return home was ever an option. Michael's health turnaround was a small miracle. His family, of course, was naturally concerned about us going back home, but I was adamant that if I could manage, I would continue to do so. Having Michael back home would make him happy. There were a lot of adjustments and changes. Our time was continually filled with consultations with social workers, nurses, respiratory therapists, and doctors. So Michael returned home from palliative care July 10th, 2008. And we spent a lot of that time afterwards going out for lunches and dinners with family and friends, catch-up time. And he had an appetite now. After about 3 weeks of doing this, I had to talk to Michael about going to hospice care. I couldn't cope with the responsibilities and the daily care he needed anymore. I needed professional help. We were lucky, and there was an opening at the Salvation Army Road in Hospice House. We went to have a look, and we moved in the next day on July 30th. Moving in was admitting that the end was near and that Michael would die there. I moved into the hospice with him. I could not imagine being there and waking up in the middle of the night and being scared. Our cat Spider, who we adopted early in the year, also moved in. So we made the room as homey and comfortable as possible. Book excerpt number 2. August 9, 2008. It is raining today, and this morning Michael woke up struggling to breathe and was given more breakthrough doses of morphine. He is very tired, and it is a difficult time for all of us. Spider feels the stress as he pooped and peed on Michael's bed. His friend Cynthia came to visit us around noon and brought Spider a red leash. She told Michael how much she loves him. She asked him if he knew where he was before he was born. That really made him think and ponder. She also told him to hang on. She had no idea how tough things had been for Michael in the last little while. I told him that I am selfish and I don't want him to go, but I don't want him suffering anymore. Part of his fear, I think, was the actual dying process. Would it be painful? Would it linger? After Cynthia left, Michael and I continued their conversation about life and death. Michael wondered why things had turned out the way they did. I asked him if he wondered how it came to be that he was born to his parents and that he was born in Vancouver and not that he was born in, say, Ethiopia. I told him all of our lives are planned before we came to be and that God or a greater power had figured out all our lives. Our meeting was also part of this as well. Michael rested for a bit, but not well. He had to take more medications and he was so tired of having to do this as it was constant and never ending. I told him I knew he was so tired of doing this. Earlier that morning, Michael asked me to call his parents as well as Eric, Barry, and Molly. Eric is his son, Barry is his brother, and Molly is Barry's partner. He wanted them to come to the hospice as soon as possible. He also did not want his parents to drive there and made a point of asking someone to pick them up. He somehow knew that his time was very near. He told me later that evening that I had been such a trooper and that he cannot go on any longer and that I need to have my life back. Before Michael died, either on the Friday or Saturday, I cannot remember for certain which, he said to me early in the morning, "Did I hear about this place? That if he never leaves here, he will never die. He will always be okay if he stays here." It sounded to me like he was talking about heaven and that he was preparing to leave. His health had continued to deteriorate and had changed greatly within a week. He was only in hospice for 12 days before he died. So now I'll talk about anticipatory grief. While we're in the hospice, I sought out as much information as possible to help me understand how I was going to feel. I read about anticipatory grief, and it helped as I was struggling with so many emotions. I read that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief: denial, bargaining, depression, anger, and acceptance, which is the process by which most people cope after loss, can also be present in anticipatory grief. Anxiety, dread, guilt, helplessness, hopelessness, and feeling overwhelmed are also common. I also learned that the person who is dying can also experience anticipatory grief. Michael didn't talk much about the future after he would die. He wanted me to be happy and he wanted us all to be okay. Michael did say he did not want to be forgotten, and he asked that we cook his recipes to keep his memory alive. Here's my last vocab cert. I never knew how I would be with someone who has died, as I have never been there when it happened. It has always been much later, at the funeral home, that I would see them. This was very different, as Michael had been the love of my life. He was the person that I loved most in this world, other than my sons. I couldn't hold or touch him enough. I kept kissing his face, his forehead, his lips, and it wasn't scary to me at all. It felt right. And then as I held his hands, they got colder and colder. I hugged his body close to me. I knew that this was the last time that I would see Michael, and I couldn't bear to let him go, even though I knew that he was no longer part of this body. The light had already left. After seeing him dead, I finally understood the light a person has, which is talked about so much in yoga. I never understood it before. I told him he needs to come back to me in my dreams as I meet him. It's now 4 in the morning, and I woke up, and it was cold, and there was no Michael in my dreams. It feels strange and surreal. I feel lost without him. I spent the morning puttering around the house. I unpacked and sorted things out. Jeremy helped me put some things away. Jeremy's my youngest son. I got out all the pictures of Michael and I from the lake, Cuba, and the wedding. It's now 1 a.m., and although I should be asleep, I find I cannot rest. Thinking about Michael makes me sob uncontrollably. I've got the times mixed up. Immediately after Michael's death, I was distraught, and everything was so very hard. I not only lost Michael, but my home and life with him. I never went back to our place after he died. I just couldn't. Everyone else had their person. I didn't anymore. I knew that counseling was what I needed in order to help me make sense of what I was going through. I did join group counseling at St. Paul's Hospital, and I was also able to obtain some one-on-one sessions of counseling at Crossroads Hospice. The counseling helped me tremendously. As well, I read everything I could get my hands on to cope with grief. So now my next section is about grief. Patton Oswalt wrote the best definition of grief that I've ever heard or ever read. He lost his wife in early 2016 when she died unexpectedly in her sleep. This is what he said. Depression is like the tallest kid in the 4th grade, dinging rubber bands off the back of your head and feeling safe on the playground, knowing that no teacher is coming to help you. Grief, as Jason Statham, holding that fourth grade bully's head in the toilet, and then effing your teacher that you've got a crush on in front of the class. Grief makes depression cower behind you and apologize for being such a dick. Harsh words for a harsh emotion. I believe that grief is the toughest emotion that we as humans must deal with, and we are ill-equipped to cope. When someone dies, everyone is supportive, food is brought to the home, comfort is given in the form of encouraging words, and help is given with all the arrangements that need to be made. We have rituals to deal with dying, a funeral, celebration of life, then everyone goes back to their daily lives, except for those that are closest to the deceased. Their worlds are never going to be the same again. They live with their grief day in and day out. It does soften in time for most, but many are consumed with their grief and cannot move on. In our society, we get maybe 2-3 days off for bereavement. If you need more time, it's vacation. Then everyone expects you to return to normal. In 2017, I believe that social media has really helped a lot of people. There's a lot more support for your grief. People reach out and you do not feel so alone. It's also a safe place to say how you feel. I've read about families whose child dies and grief becomes their focus, and the remaining children have not only lost their sibling, but their parent in the process. Marriages end as one spouse copes differently than the other. In other cases, it draws the couple closer, and they lean on each other. After Michael died, even though I knew in my logical mind that he didn't want me to mope and be happy, I sometimes felt guilty for being happy, for laughing, for not thinking about him once in an entire day. Before he died, he made me promise I would be happy. I am these days, but it's taken me a long time to get here. Sometimes I feel bad, or that there was something wrong with me, and then I grieved from him for so long. We were not together for 20 years, just 19 months. And I even knew before we met that he had a terminal illness. I wondered why I had such a hard time letting go. I think it may have had something to do with the fact that for me, it hurt so much that I couldn't deal with the grief, and I constantly put it back on the shelf until there was a better time. Although he and I talked about every aspect of living and dying, and we cried together, sharing our fears, I still felt I needed to be as strong as possible for him. I would wait and cry when I was alone, on the yoga mat, when I went for a run, or in the shower. I think with me, it might be a learned behavior. When my children were young, it was often not a good time to cry, and so I postponed it until later. After Michael's death, I would send emails to him. Maybe part of me hoped I would get a response from the great beyond. I would talk to him all the time. 6 weeks after he died, I wrote this. I'm grateful for all the times I reached out and touched you as you slept. I just needed to have my hand or body touch, or body part touch a part of you. I would always remind myself that I need to savor and soak up all of this now, as one day I wouldn't be able to have your touch. How I wish I had never ever stopped touching you for a moment. I would think this as I sat next to you and would cuddle with you, or would hold your hand or lean on you. Well, the agony is just unbelievable. I have to, as I know I must, let myself cry and say to you all of what I feel, for if I don't, I will never be able to heal and move forward. I will never, in essence, move on, as there is no moving on for me. You were and are the love of my life and will always be. After Michael's death, I started to look at couple relationships differently. Every couple that is in love now, if they stay together until one dies, they will have to go through the grief and loss of a spouse. And my last part is Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross talks about the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. I experienced this. Even though I saw Michael's body and knew he was dead, I hoped it was a mistake, that he would suddenly gasp and sit up and ask, what the hell is going on, and why are you all looking at me like that? So anger. I was angry he had to die. Why him? He was a good man, and so many people loved him and would mourn his death deeply. Bargaining. This is a stage where you're really not of sound mind. I kept wishing I'd met him earlier. I could have maybe done something to have changed his life. There was an old TV show way before you guys were ever born, where an angel, called Twice in a Lifetime, where an angel takes a person who has just died, they go back in time when the person was younger, and they could have made a change in the outcome of their life. I kept hoping Michael's death was a mistake, that he was actually in the witness protection program, or that it was a misunderstanding. Depression. What was the point of living when we're all going to die anyways? Why make plans? Life could turn on a dime and your dreams get snuffed out anyways. I even told Michael before he died that I would go with him if I could. It was my despair and fear of life without him that was talking. I have 2 sons, family and friends that I love. I would never want to willingly leave. Yeah. Acceptance. It's a tough pill to swallow, but we all die. Nothing lasts forever. It's what we do with life that matters. I couldn't handle the thought that I'd never get to touch Michael again, to hold his hand, to hug him, and to stroke his cheek. It was a pain that struck deep inside of me. Many things happened after he died that reassured me that his body was gone, but somewhere he still continued to be. And he does live on in his son and daughter and family and friends and my memories of him. So last Monday I got a phone call at work. The man introduced himself, and I recognized the last name, and he is the brother of the very first lawyer I ever worked for. He called to tell me Roy had passed away. I was heartbroken. I had not spoken to Roy since 2008. You know, there was no problems with the relationship. We just lost touch, drifted apart. And I spent a lot of last week crying. My boss had been really good to me, and I was so sad. And I realized that, you know, I could have made an effort to have seen him. Sorry. I could have made an effort to see him, and I didn't. I do know that when a death occurs, it brings up grief of all the other losses. As well, January 11 was the first time I'd ever talked to Michael, and also was the anniversary of his mother's death on January 14th. So I guess I was already sort of in a grief mode. While living in the hospice, I did think about what life would be like after Michael died. I thought about how I would survive without him. I wondered what my life would be like, and how I would feel, say, 10 years later. This August will be 9 years since Michael died, and for the most part, I have a happy and full life. If it wasn't for Michael, I would have never written and published a book. I would never be having author events, meeting so many people, or having unbelievable life experiences. I wouldn't be here talking to all of you, and for that, I'm most grateful. So, the synopsis is, I wrote a book called For Michael, Love, Cynda, published about a year ago. It chronicles our meeting, dating, falling in love, dealing with cancer, mortality, and coping with the ongoing day-to-day challenges to still find joy when he knew the end was looming. My book doesn't end with Michael's death, but it deals with my grief afterwards and how I've coped and learned to live with loss. So things that I've done after he died is, I went to Europe when I was 49. I didn't wait till 50. 50 might not show up. I also finally went on that trip that I've wanted my whole life. I wanted to do a mission trip. I went to Cambodia with a group of others, and we helped people living in poverty. I learned to plant rice. I learned to make cement. Like, it was amazing. And too often there's things you want to do and you think, yeah, someday we'll do it. And someday doesn't always happen. So it's important to plan to do these things and not always wait too long. So this Saturday, as you know, I will be at the chapter's location at Pine Tree Village. There will be cookies.
Bring lots.
There will be a limit of cookies. And between 12 and 3, and I hope to see you there. Thank you so much, and thank you, Alana and Vancouver Career College, for allowing me to come speak to your class.
Thank you, Cynda.
Thank you. Insightful. Well, like in a time frame, how long did it take you to go through the 5 stages? Like, did it take a month or like a couple days? Or?
It's unpredictable for every single person.
Yeah.
I really grieved for a very long time. What I found helped me heal was finishing the book. I went to a great workshop last year put on by a teacher who teaches at SFU on memoir writing. And he said, it's not that you want to write the memoir, you're compelled to. You have to get it out of your system. And I felt by actually finally dealing with all the emotions and the feelings and writing, I was able to deal with the emotions. Okay. So you can't really predict. Everybody's different, every circumstance is different, depends where you are in your life, what life experiences you've had when you've suffered the loss. Yes?
So, why do you think that your book was picked up for publishing?
I actually self-published.
Nice.
So you
I
self-published,
self-published, yeah.
but it's doing well
It's doing pretty good.
because it's an important topic that people can relate
It
to.
is. Many people are drawn to it. One of my proudest moments was a woman who I'd met at a conference, and she told me her husband had beaten cancer twice, and he was dealing with cancer again, and she bought my book. Someone else would run away from the topic, but she wanted to know how I dealt with things, and for her, it really helped. You know, and her husband's still around and is doing all right, but it was definitely something she wanted to read.
Sir, when you met Michael, you knew that he's dying.
Yes,
You knew that. He
Yes.
was in last stage of cancer, right?
yes. He was already stage 4 terminal cancer, and he told me that his cancer was not in remission, but it was being controlled. And there were other things that happened as well, because we started dating January 20th, and February 13th, we found out that he would need further chemo treatments. Father's Day that year, he had a brain tumor removed, because lung cancer tends to metastasize to your brain. And he'd been having these headaches, and he wasn't sure what it was. They weren't sure if it was the medicine or it was just having a cancer. And he went for an MRI, and it revealed that he had a tumor about the size of a golf ball, which was ironic because he loved to golf.
Gee.
Yeah, so the tumor was removed successfully by a neurosurgeon, and that bought Michael a whole year plus.
And my boyfriend has a cancer, but he's in stage 2.
Okay,
So
I'm sorry to hear that.
they gave us hope. So
Good.
yeah. But when you met him, he was stage 4.
He was already stage 4. But you never know with medicine, because it really is an experiment. The doctors have X amount of knowledge, and they apply it to each person to the best of their ability. And for some people, the treatments work, and for others, it doesn't. And I do believe in miracles. Lance Armstrong came back from stage 4. You know, it does happen sometimes.
It does happen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
When you met Michael, was he accepting the fact that he was gonna die at that point?
Yes.
Or did he?
Yes, he'd already accepted the fact that he was going to die. He would even joke about it once in a while, you know, if there's a long lineup at the store. Come on, I'm dying here, you know, I can't wait too long. I'm on a time clock. And it changed how he thought about things, you know, if he was gonna buy something, it's like, do I really want to spend the money on this? Do I want to buy a cheaper version? Because who knows how long I'm gonna get to use it. He had written letters to both his children, to his daughter and son, and he continued writing those as time went on. He ended up living much longer than he expected, and by then, you know, it brought its own challenges too, because then it's like, well, how much longer? And then also, will there be much pain and medication, and also to be able to pay for things, because he wasn't able to work, of course, and his family helped to pay for his rent. I helped pay for things where I could, and it made it that much more challenging, because you're sick, and then you've got to worry about money as well, because you need a roof over your head. And I think that's an issue for a lot of people.
And that's all areas that you guys would have to help with, because it's not just, you're not dealing with the grief. If you're working in this field, it's the economic barriers, you know, and all of those things, that all the other stressors that come along with it.
Yeah, and getting appointments with doctors, you know,
Yeah.
whether that oncologist is going to be able to see you, whether you're going to be able to get the test. I found the BC Cancer Agency was phenomenal. They were just amazing with everything. But I also saw a lot of times with the oncology doctors, they'd seen too much of this. And sometimes it was hard for them to be positive. So that makes it difficult on a person, because when a person is dealing with cancer, this is their first and only experience usually.
Right.
Or maybe lost with some other family members or friends. But for the doctors, they see this day in and day out, and it's hard for them not to be a little jaded.
I really like that comment that you make, that, you know, when people reach out and they offer their support, it's usually at the time when it's the funeral arrangements, and, you know, at the time of the death, but when the grieving person needs someone the most support, it's afterwards. It's after the funeral, and that's when it actually kind of hits them.
Yes, it's true.
And where they're probably going through those stages. And then it's just quiet, like there's nobody offering support.
A
And
lot of
that's when
time-
they need someone the most.
That's true. A lot of time there isn't as much support afterwards.
Yeah.
Because people don't necessarily realize, you know, they may remember when that person has a significant birthday, a date,
Sure.
such as a birthday or an anniversary. They may remember. But usually it's sort of your closest friends, your family that will remember those dates.
Yeah.
We still get together periodically on the anniversary of Michael's passing, as well as the anniversary of his birthday, just to remember him, to celebrate, to talk about some stories. we used to go out for a lot of dinners, because that was a big thing, going out for meals with the family. And one time, Michael had a fake front tooth, and he's playing with it. And it flipped out of his mouth and went flying across the table. He howled with laughter. Everybody else howled with laughter. And that was a bright, happy memory of
Yeah.
when he was sick.
Is there one message that you would give someone who maybe in a similar situation where they may be grieving or preparing for change, or to somebody who may be working with clients? Is it like one message from your own experience that you would like to pass on?
Don't try and do anything by yourself. Get help. Get as much support as you can. Do what feels good, within reason. Like, don't drink every single day, or, take drugs to cope. But get help. Get help from someone that's trained. Get counseling. Reach out, through the hospital, through the hospice, and and your family doctor, and ask for help. Because it's there. It's just a matter of reaching out for it. And once you talk to other people that have gone through similar losses, you won't feel so alone. And it'll make it easier. Because I think isolation is a real problem too. When someone's grieving, they don't want to go out. They don't want to see anybody. They lose interest in their regular activities. And that's not a good thing. But you're also broken right now, so you need that time to recoup and get back to normal. Or, as much as normal can be with this, new loss in your life. But yeah, reaching out for help is very important.
I think some other people have some questions now.
Question.
Okay.
How did you distinguish the trauma and the grief? That's number one. Number two, what interests you what interests you to get yourself involved in that situation? Is it because based on your faith, or you believe in destiny? Because
Very interesting question.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Great question, David. Thank you. So why did I get involved with a man that was dying? We are all dying, not imminently, but we don't know. I used to tell him, I said, yeah, we sort of have a best before date for you, whereas most of us don't. And I could have died before him. There's no guarantees. I was, the fact that he was dying terrified me. But it was more that he was such a compelling personality. He was incredibly smart, and he was funny, and he was so interesting. And I realized upon talking to him that if I didn't get involved with this man, if I didn't have anything romantic, I just wanted to be in his life. And I knew that if I didn't pursue something, I'd be sorry for the rest of my life. And I didn't want to do that. Our very first date, we're driving to the restaurant. He tells me how he made these pot muffins and how he took them to the golf course. And, they ate some, and he goes, whoa, I was just like flying, and just, he was so candid and so honest. I guess when you're dying, there's less pretension,
Yeah.
You are what you see is what you get. There was nothing to lose by saying what you felt and how you feel. And that was really quite something special, because he was honest and he didn't hide things.
I think the other question was how did you separate the trauma and the grieving?
I would say it was sort of intertwined.
Yeah.
Even though I knew he was going to die, I knew it was imminent, I still hoped for that miracle. How wouldn't you? You would hope for a miracle that one day the doctor would say, hey, we got this great new drug, or, because we would go for these regular checkups, and they'd be like, his count is better. It kept getting better and better for the longest time. I thought, ooh, love is doing it. And it can for a certain amount of time. There's so many things unexplained in this world that we don't know. And so things could have been okay. But I knew logically and from a practical point of view, the odds were really good that I would lose him one day and I would have to deal with the grief. But I decided it was worth it. Does that answer your question, David, I hope?
Thanks.
most of the people that you know who have read your book,
Mhm.
are they people going through this themselves, grief, or?
No, there's actually people that just want to read a love story,
Okay.
people that know me and were interested in reading it. And then a lot of strangers who have bought the book, just basically based on the topic, I guess. I sometimes say it's kind of like a Nicholas Sparks story, but it's a true story. Walk to Remember was a love story where one person was dying, but they didn't know at the outset. That's where mine is a little different.
Are there people who are experiencing grief who have approached you and have told you that reading this book really helped them? Or do you think it would be difficult to read this book if you were actually in it?
I think it would be difficult to read it, but it depends on your mindset. It depends on the type of person you are.
Yeah.
Because there are people that have had grief. Someone I actually know had lost his wife to cancer, and he read my book. But he said he got to a certain point and he couldn't do it anymore. And he said, he's really glad he read it, and he felt he really got to know Michael, but there was stuff that was just too painful going forward that he just didn't want to touch. And he'd only lost his wife a couple of years ago. Because too often when people buy the book, I don't always know their history.
Right.
Yeah.
But for sure, if somebody was repressing certain things.
I think it would help them realize they're not
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah, that's what I think too.
I've also been told by many people that my writing was very raw. And it was really important to me to be brutally honest or don't bother. Because then I'm not going to help anybody, and I won't help myself either. So I really expressed how I felt. There's some hysterical rantings in there, here and there, because that's how I felt. And, too often, like I said, someone dies, the funeral happens, and then they expect things to go back to normal. A lady came up to me at one of the book signings, and she said, I talked to my mother the other day. My husband has just died 4 weeks ago. We were together almost 30 years. My mother said, aren't you back to normal yet? Aren't you okay? And this daughter was distraught. She's like, how can I ever be okay again? And I told her to please go get some help, get some counseling, talk to somebody that will help you.
Because the feelings that they're experiencing are actually normal.
Oh yeah, they are.
And that's what people don't realize, right? That those stages that Kubler-Ross was talking about, that those are normal reactions.
Right.
But if somebody were to read your book, what I'm saying is I think they would identify with it.
Yes.
I'm not alone.
Yes, it would
See
definitely help them.
Different story, but same patterns of
Yeah,
reaction.
definitely similar patterns, because even though everyone experiences grief differently,
Yeah.
we all go through the same stages.
Yeah.
And so knowing that this is what will happen, you will go through these stages, and this is how you feel, make you feel less alone. And also makes you more willing to talk to other people too, because after a while, people don't like it too, you're so sad all the time.
Yeah,
And then they
it's
don't want to
true.
talk to you so much anymore. Unless they've experienced the loss themselves, then they get it. Because I told that woman, if you ever want to contact me, please feel free to do so. She never did. But, I put it out there just so she knew that someone else who'd gone through something cares and is there if she wants it.
So, how did you get the courage, I guess, to actually go and speak to someone? Like, in my experience, I was too scared. I didn't want to talk to somebody about it. I didn't want to have to go see somebody.
Yeah. For me, it was different, I guess, because I've always firmly believed in counseling. And so, I know how to draft legal documents. I can launch a lawsuit. I don't know how to heal from a broken heart or from a loss. I don't know how to do that, so I need to go see someone that has had the training and has the qualifications to cope in that area. So for me, it's like, I'm going to go see a counselor, someone who understands this. And I guess, the fear part wasn't there for me because it was more that I need help. I need help because I'm just like, dying here. I need someone to help me. I need to not feel so horrible anymore.
So did you have a question, or Erin, or Andrea?
How did you change your life after having the book?
After writing the book, how my life changed?
Yes.
Well, I'm talking to you guys, which
I
is
know.
pretty amazing.
Okay.
I've also met a lot of incredible people. So one example is, because I do my pitch all the time on people. I come up to someone and say, you know, I'm an author, I've written this book, and I ask them the question, you know, if they met someone. And so I went up to a guy at Best Buy. I figured he was making some money on me because I was buying a watch from him. And so he goes, oh, funny you should ask that. He says, I have a story for you. So he lived in a small country in Europe, and he traveled all over Europe and decided it was time to go to Southeast Asia. So he went to Southeast Asia and traveled, and he met a girl in Vietnam. He met her, and they really liked each other. He had to go back home, and then they communicated by email and telephone and things. Then eventually he moved to Vietnam, and they were together there. And he says, now I live in Vancouver, because she decided she wanted to come move to Canada. And he said, and next month we're getting married. I would have never been privileged to such a beautiful story if I hadn't asked him my question. And so, you know, that is just one of many beautiful stories that have been shared with me because of the question. I've also had very sad stories, you know, of families dealing with cancer and loss, you know, people in the midst of it, people that have already lost their family, and also how their lives have changed because of a cancer diagnosis. I talked to a young bus driver who said he would have never dated someone who was ill, but after losing his mom to cancer, now he wouldn't discount that person. And, you know, too often, I've heard something about, you know, there's a lot of single people because they choose to be single, because there's always something wrong with the person. You know, nobody's perfect. And maybe if you look past that, you'll find an amazing person behind that. You know, and so I think sometimes after having written the book, it's opened my eyes a little more. I like to think I was already a little more willing to invest in someone who wasn't perfect, because I'm far from perfect, you know. And you never know what life experiences you'll get.
Would you do it again?
No, I don't think I could. I don't think I could do it emotionally again.
Mm-hmm.
I would be somebody's friend, but I don't think I could. I don't think I could handle doing it again. I think it would be too painful for me because of what I've experienced. And I just thought, with my luck, that's what would happen. You know, or there's always the possibility and the likelihood that I will date again, and I will meet someone, and we'll fall in love, and one of us will get sick, and then you'll have to go through it. It's part of life, or you choose to be alone. And it would be a shame to be alone when there's so many fantastic people out there.
Well, it sounds like he really enriched your life in ways that might not have ever happened had you not met him. But there's the sacrifice, and you know that you're going to experience the loss.
Yeah.
So if you were to weigh that today, sitting here, you're saying no, still, you can't do it again.
I don't think I could do it again with a
Yeah.
new person, but I also have no regrets that I did with Michael.
Right.
Absolutely no regrets at all, because I just feel that he enriched my life so much. And I always wanted to write a book as a teenager. My first stab at it was a Harlequin romance. It was a love story. It was awful. You know, I wrote like a couple pages, and it was just awful. I had no life experiences, had never been in love, didn't have a clue. And, you know, now I really, with Michael, I really had a subject. And I've had life experiences.
So in any way has this experience, is there any philosophical or spiritual element to it that sort of enlightened you?
Well, I guess maybe-
Or the fact that you met him, like, was there a purpose, or?
Yeah, I think there was definitely a purpose. I was also a teenager who was fascinated a little bit by death.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I was reading Elizabeth Kubler-Ross as
Yeah.
a teenager, here and there.
Oh,
And also because as teenagers, we're really emotional, and you're hormonal, and you think about suicide. I did several month-long presentation or project on suicide, you know, and what a shame it is for people to take their lives, because it's like they're so distraught and so desperate they can't see past it. But, you know, as a teenager, I sort of understood, because, you know, we were very emotional at the time. And, you know, I wondered about death. I went to Sunday school. I went to Baptist, sort of fire and brimstone ministers, where you were terrified. If you didn't believe in God, you're going to burn in hell. And so you question your mortality. You wonder about religion. You know, what if I spend my whole life believing in this, and it turns out to not be real? You know, so all those questions. So I guess, you know, Michael coming into my life, I really believe was a twist of fate. Like, it's definitely destiny. Because how else could I have found him through all those hundreds of people, thousands of people probably, on Plenty of Fish?
Yeah.
The boss that just passed away last Monday, his best friend was a man named Harvey. So I met Harvey in the early 1990s. Harvey died years later, and then I met Michael. Harvey was Michael's uncle.
Oh,
What are the
really?
chances? Yeah.
That is wild.
Wow.
Yeah. So there was a lot of things.
A lot of synchronicities.
There was a lot. Michael invited me to dinner with some golfing friends. Told me that this man was like his best golfing buddy. Told me his name's Ollie. Ollie was the owner of an insurance company who I dealt with at that same law firm. I used to talk to Ollie, and then here I was going to Ollie's, house for dinners with his wife.
Small world.
It is, yeah. And then Ollie just passed away very recently too. And they're up there golfing now, Ollie and Michael, and his uncle.
Wow.
Yeah. So there was a lot of synchronicity, and those are just a few of them. There's even more.
Very interesting. So no more questions?
So no,
Somebody might have asked.
you did say that this coming August will be 9 years since Michael's passing.
Yes.
When did you start thinking about writing a book about Michael?
I actually started journaling for myself while he was still alive, because I really wanted to keep a record of us. I'm realistic enough to know that your memory fades over time, and it's never as crystal clear. And to me, it was really important to write in the moment. So when I was feeling certain feelings, I would write it down. And there'd be emails back and forth with Michael. The book has a lot of emails between the two of us in there. There's also emails to family. And so from that, and I just wrote because it made me feel better. So after he died, I would continue writing. And within the first 5 years, it was probably a finished book. I just had to piece it together. And then I would read the story of us, and it felt good. It felt good. It made him alive again. And I knew what was coming, of course. And those parts I don't read as much, but it just felt good to have something. And his memory will always live on. His kids have a copy of his book, as do family members. His dad was able to read it, but only part way, and then he found it too difficult, which I don't blame him. And I don't know if his brother will ever read the book. But it's there, and we call each other girlfriend-in-law, so she is Michael's brother's partner. Michael only had one sibling. She read the book before it was published, and she really loved it. For her, it keeps his memory alive. And it chronicles the happy times, the sad times, and, a person's life.
I'm sure he's very proud.
Yes.
Well, I think that...
I guess, okay, well, thank you,
Okay.
Cynda.
Thank you. Thank you, too.